In astrology, Saturn is the planet of hard work, boundaries, and karma. It represents lessons you came here to learn, as well as what you're going to leave behind. Let's unpack Saturn through all 12 signs and talk about your karmic legacy. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. If you like my work and enjoy my content, please show your support by leaving a like or a comment, subscribing, and pressing the notification bell. You can watch another one of my videos. All of that helps promote my channel's growth, brings more eyes, more attention, more subscribers my ways. You can also say thank you by buying me a coffee or tea or croissant. I really appreciate every single one of you who has taken advantage of that option. Before we dive in, a couple of announcements for anyone looking for answers. You're trying to understand yourself, you feel confused by the current energies, you want to figure out what's coming up for you in the future. You have questions about your relationships, you can find answers on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I do all kinds of readings. There's a couple of links. You can choose whatever works best for you. On my website, in the shop section of it, you can find a variety of planetary creations, such as candles and oils. I work with astrology in the most proactive way, harnessing the energy of the moment, especially when it's good, right? We have birth charts that are strong and astrological placements that are strong, and so we can maximize astrology if we know when the good time is coming, because then we can capture it, encapsulate it, and bring it into the real world. In this video, I'd like to highlight my Saturn in Aquarius candle. Since we are talking about Saturn, this one was created with Saturn in the sign of rulership, back when Saturn was still in Aquarius, which is early 2023. And this one also actually captures Saturn conjunct Venus, so it has the soothing energy, helping Saturn not just be a boss, but also be charming while barking orders potentially. This could be lovely for anyone struggling with finishing tasks, completing your projects, asserting yourself. It can bring rewards, recognition, and mastery, especially good for anyone born with their Saturn in the sign of fall or detriment, Aries, Cancer, or Leo. Saturn in the 8th house, Saturn in the 6th house, Saturn aspecting any of your personal planets, like Saturn conjunct, square, opposition, your sun, your moon, your Venus, or Mars. This is the candle for you. Thank you for listening. So let's talk about Saturn, right? I like to start these videos with talking about Saturn astronomically. Saturn is the last visible planet, right? We have 10 planets that we are dealing with in astrology, from the sun all the way to Pluto, even though Pluto's nature as a planet has been questioned by many people. But Saturn is the limit of the visible solar system. It is located right next to Jupiter, but it's the last planet we can see. And it's on many levels, it's kind of astronomically also a counterpart to Jupiter, and then astrologically it's also a counterpart to Jupiter, because Jupiter is bright, Jupiter is visible, Jupiter is like shiny, right? While Saturn's light is dim, Saturn is like far away. And because Saturn represents the limit of what our eyes can see, Saturn has long been associated to the limits in our life, right? Like Saturn is associated with with death, with old age, with poverty, with being kind of like on an outskirt of a system, because it's the last visible planet. So it's all about boundaries, and boundaries that are challenging, but boundaries that are also protective, right? Like you may have a roadblock that delays you from reaching your goal, or you may have a wall around you, 4 walls around you, protecting you from the elements outside, from rain, from snow, from cold, right? Walls of your apartment. So Saturn is not just that like energy of death and endings and hard stops and old age, but it's also realism. It's the truth and honesty that is necessary to live your life to the fullest. But of course, Saturn is not a friend of children, right? Like Saturn has long been known as the enemy of children, the enemy of youth, because as a kid, You want Jupiter, you want the expansion, the growth, the abundance, the optimism, the belief that things will get better. While Saturn is here to point out that eventually the youth ends, right? That's why we have Saturn return. Saturn return is the boundary between your 20s and your 30s. It's the boundary between your 50s and your 60s. It's always about major transitional moments. In your late 20s, you're leaving the exuberance of youth behind. You're entering the workforce. You're becoming a parent. You're getting married. You're saying no to a lot of freedoms on some level. And, you know, with the second Saturn return in your late 50s, many people start retiring. They start sort of looking at the last 30 years of their life and making major adjustments. So Saturn definitely teaches you that you got to be realistic. You got to look at the world through real kind of not rose-colored glasses, versus Jupiter might be very gentle with you. And I always kind of think of Jupiter as this maybe like, you know, your like uncle who's had a little bit too much to drink and is just like telling stories, like typical Sagittarius, right? And is like telling you, go play in the yard, do whatever you want, life is great. And you like that uncle, but that uncle will not be the one who will like tell you to not cross the street when the car is passing, to watch out for red light. Like Saturn is more like this harsh grandpa, right? Who's watching over you, and maybe is not the most gentle, but actually protects you. So Saturn very much is about protecting you and reminding you about the realism and the realistic kind of concerns in life. So it can teach us patience, it can teach us diligence, self-control, responsibility. And on the positive, it can very much be make you like strong Saturn that's well aspected, Saturn that is worked with in a natal chart can make you reliable, trustworthy, patient, give you the power to endure, the perseverance that you need, right? But on the negative, it can make you a little bit it can harden you. It can make you overly ambitious. It can make you sarcastic and negative and sort of pessimistic and inflexible, right? So you gotta listen to Saturn, but you gotta embody it in a healthier way, and you got to remember that life is not just all Saturn, that Saturn is just the side of life that is quite important, but it's not all there is. So in a natal chart, Saturn indicates how well you accept responsibility, whether you're self-disciplined and mature, and what delays and challenges you may expect to encounter in your life. So this is it on Saturn. As always, going to mention, you have to look at the entire chart, right? We're going to talk about Saturn and zodiac signs, but it's really important to see what the planet ruling that zodiac sign is doing, and that will apply to everyone born with their Saturn. Everyone except Saturn in Capricorn or Saturn in Aquarius, because that's Saturn in its home sign. But you got to look at the chart as a unity. You got to consider everything together. So if you want to understand things and you have specific questions to you, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com, and let's talk about Saturn through the zodiac signs. So starting with Saturn in Aries, right? Saturn is considered to be in its fall in Aries because the nature of Aries is somewhat contradictory to Saturn. So there's kind of like important lessons of patience that come with having Saturn in Aries. And, like Saturn being the planet of hard realism and sort of knowledge that things take time, that things can be, that you got to be slow and steady and take it one step at a time. And Aries is anything but that, right? Like Aries is restless. Aries is quick. Aries is impulsive and impatient and sort of youthful. So a lot of times you get this Aries energy either contradicting Saturn or Saturn contradicting the Aries energy, right? That's always kind of like how Saturn works. So with people born with Saturn and Aries often have this sense that they have to be mature right now. They have to be successful right now or yesterday, right? I have so many clients where they come to me and they're like, in their 20s, and they feel so pressured to be like at a certain place in their life, to be married already, to be successful already, to have the best job already. So So that's where they have to dial it back a little bit and learn the patience of Saturn. I highly recommend for everyone born with Saturn and Aries my Saturn and Aquarius candle, because this will chill you out. This will calm you down. This will help you trust that you got to take it one step at a time, and will like sort of help you learn Saturn in the Saturnian serious way. Also, it's gray and it's decorated with 3 sapphire stones, which are the stones of Saturn. So, you know, definitely you gotta learn to be patient. You gotta be careful with this placement of the tendency to overdo Saturn, right? Like Aries is like, sure, I got this. I'm brave. I'm courageous. So sometimes you may just take on a bunch of responsibilities, write crazy long to-do lists, and then because it's not realistic to accomplish them, you end up feeling bad about yourself, right? Or you end up being like hard on yourself for not accomplishing as much as you wanted to accomplish. So the danger is definitely taking too many things, but also maybe overcommitting. Like, you know, you want to be brave, you want to just do things, but then you end up saying yes to too many things, or you're overestimating your resources, or you're saying yes too soon, which leads to you not making sort of well on all promises. Sometimes the danger with Saturn and Aries too is like starting things but not finishing them, because that's very much an Aries quality. And Saturn can also dampen your enthusiasm at times. It can also make you feel bad about sort of being selfish or fighting for things or showing your aggression. So sometimes you may end up sort of struggling asserting yourself and struggling kind of like coming across as selfish, right? So you may choose to like sit it down, and like those two will bounce back and forth. Like at times you'll be overly aggressive and being like, I'll do everything, and at other times you may feel sort of suppressed by Saturn. At the same time, people born with Saturn and Aries grow through new experiences. Your legacy is to explore who you truly are, to understand yourself, to cultivate courage and initiative and your daring sort of skills. But because, once again, because it's Saturn in its fall, it might take you some time, right? It might take you time to understand that it's okay to be self-centered. It's going to take you some time to understand how to do it in moderation. I have a few clients with Saturn and Aries, and like, you know, you consistently see people sort of getting married early and diving into like professional, like sort of serious responsibilities early. So, and that is great. That is like important, but sometimes you want to make sure you're like not losing yourself in all of these potential duties that feel exciting to you. So yeah, so like, you know, learning to be patient, learning to assert yourself and try new things without sort of rushing into them could be quite an important lesson. And also like trusting that, you know, that it's okay to be self-driven, to be self-oriented. And actually, I think on some level too, with Saturn in Aries, part of your legacy is teaching other people that it's okay to believe in themselves, teaching other people through personal examples sometimes that it's okay to be brave, that it's okay to try new things, that it's okay to focus on yourself once in a while. Let me know how this resonates. Obviously, this is just talking about your Saturn. You have to look at what Mars is doing because it rules your Saturn. And if you're looking for more, you want to understand your entire chart, book a reading on my website, Anastasia.astrology.com. We can take a look at all of your placements and break it all down and describe your chart, your year to come, or your relationship. For those born with Saturn in Taurus, this is Saturn ruled by Venus. This is Saturn in a yin sign that is very productive, right? Like with Saturn in Taurus, you are focused on achievement. You're focused on owning things and being self-reliant, right? You feel kind of more accomplished when you are productive and grounded and can like sort of leave things behind. It's like, to me, Saturn in Taurus is the classical like build a house, plant a tree, raise a child type of placement, right? Of course, Taurian qualities can affect Saturn, right? So with Taurus, being at times maybe self-indulgent, being a little bit lazy. So sometimes your achievement can be hindered by that tendency to self-indulge. But at the same time, part of you can also feel guilty, right? Like there might be this like internal dialogue between Taurus and Saturn. Like Taurus energy within you wants to chill, especially if you have more planets in Taurus and not just your Saturn. But like Taurus maybe wants to relax and enjoy life, but then Saturn is like, no, this is wrong. So which can lead to actually like maybe even issues around food, right? Where you're like binging and then purging and maybe having sort of issues there. A lot of times, you know, it's a sign of a very loyal person, a very loyal, reliable person, someone who is quite traditional in their approach. You might be someone who also strives to express yourself in the food industry, the fashion, the beauty industry, maybe finance industry. You may naturally kind of gravitate towards jobs that offer you stability. But you gotta be, you know, you sort of have to be aware of like being too conservative or too stubborn or too fearful of like taking risks and stepping outside of your comfort zone, because like traditions are there for a reason, and you are very capable of like persevering and maintaining traditions and maintaining relationships. But that tendency, that sort of Saturnian fear of losing things, of like losing your comfort, losing people that feel familiar, and even if a relationship is toxic, people born with Saturn and Taurus can't stay in it for too long, and there might be that sort of tendency to amass possessions or amass things because you're afraid of losing them. So, you know, like some of the life lessons is learning moderation, learning to not always be so conservative, that it's okay to maybe, you know, explore outside of the known traditions, allowing yourself to enjoy life, allowing yourself to take it slow and appreciate what you've accomplished without being hard on yourself. Asking for help, because Saturn and Taurus as an earth sign can be like too self-reliant to a point that it's not kind of like healthy for you. And also learning to let go sometimes, learning to let go of things that no longer serve you. Like watching that you're not clinging onto relationships, people, or situations that are toxic and unhealthy but feel familiar, and so you're just getting stuck in them. Let me know how this resonates. If you were born with this placement, please share anything you feel is worth sharing. And if you're looking for more, you want to understand yourself better, your year to come, your relationship, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'm here to help you find answers to any burning questions you might have. For those born with Saturn in Gemini, Saturn in Gemini will encourage you to understand language, to absorb a lot of different skills, to learn a lot of different facts. It will encourage you to work with your hands and to sort of gain control over what you say and how you say it. Saturn always can limit the sign, right? So with Saturn in Gemini, there might be a sense that like early in life, you couldn't quite express your playful, chatty, curious nature. So Saturn maybe limited what you had to say, or you dealt with people who were critical, or people who sort of, you know, told you like, don't move around, don't just say things without thinking, like someone who somehow like limited your playful nature. And so you grow up with a sense of like inner critic or inner dialogue, or feeling uncomfortable when you're like maybe just being lighthearted, playful, superficial, which is actually one of your strengths, right? Like it could be one of your strengths, this like playful nature, this like curious nature, this ability to learn and perfect things. People born with Saturn and Gemini can have can be like really, really good writers because they want to make sure things are perfect. Saturn in Gemini to me almost reads like a little bit of Virgo energy because it's like Gemini sort of playful, being affected by Saturn, which is like analytical, precise, and guarded on some level. So it can help you express yourself with precision of a Virgo, almost with accuracy, and be like quite logical. You can make a really good teacher with this placement because once again you have both the playfulness but also the structure of Saturn. You're maybe, you know, like I said, Saturn can limit Gemini, but sometimes Gemini can limit Saturn. So sometimes you may feel not driven to do the responsible thing or accept duties, accept your responsibilities because you kind of crave variety. So at times you gotta be mindful of like not choosing things just because they're exciting, right? Like it's always important to separate Saturnian from like joyful, right? Not every single responsibility has to make your heart beat faster, right? Not every single responsibility. It's almost like, you know, like you don't want to do laundry because it means going to the same laundromat, but you have to do laundry. So sometimes you're gonna have to repeat things and do something that's like boring and repetitive. So like learning to find variety, but not always kind of say no to things if there isn't variety, if that makes sense. And you got to make sure that you're not like limiting your own curiosity out of fear of being wrong and out of like tendency to possibly even like over intellectualize things. You can be more sensitive to criticism with this placement, especially if you had critical people around you, teachers, mentors growing up. So, you know, once again, like making sure you're not guarding yourself too much to a point that you're like not even starting things because you're too afraid. But as always with Saturn, the older you get, the better things become. You're more likely to master skills. You're more likely to explore different interests and potentially narrow your focus down, right? Like with Gemini, the trick is always not doing 15 things, but doing 2 or 3 things with as much attention as you can give them. And like I said, your strengths definitely include like logical thinking, rational mind, curiosity, and also like you can be so accepting of people with different flaws and different cultures and different places because you have that Gemini kind of adaptability, mutability, ability to get along with other people. Your sensitive areas of the body might be like lungs and arms and ribs and sort of nerves, and so more than anyone else, moving and going outside and being in the sunlight is important for you. Let me know how this resonates, if this is you, if this is your placement. And if you're curious for more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I do predictive readings, relationship readings, natal chart readings. There are a few lengths option, something for anyone, everyone. Moving on to Saturn in Cancer. This is an interesting one. Saturn is the planet of like harsh realities, and Cancer is a very soft and emotional sign, right? So Saturn is in its fall in Cancer, meaning that Saturnian lessons are not as easily sort of accepted, or they're not as comfortable for the individual born with Saturn in Cancer. So because Cancer is like such a soft and warm and vulnerable place, with Saturn being placed in the sign, it suggests that you may grow up with an environment that is like where duties and responsibilities and people who are authority figures, there might be more emotionally driven. They might not be really good at expressing the rules and sticking to the rules. And please share your experience. But like if people are born with Saturn in Cancer, a lot of times when they're younger, they might run into a situation where parents tell them one thing and then the mood shifts and the parents tell them another thing. They may have parents that need nurturance. They may have parents that are somehow wounded or vulnerable, or like a child having to step up for a mother whose husband left, and a child steps up and becomes like a de facto spouse for the mother. So there is like naturally with Saturn and Cancer, people really want to nurture people they love, and they really care emotionally for people, like for their family, but there might be the sense of some familial responsibility somehow challenging and somehow like, you know, burdensome. And especially with the mother, especially like mother, because, and like, you know, it could be daddy issues for sure, for women maybe more, but for men I could say it as like a mother. A lot of times these people tend to marry someone older or seek people who are older or responsible, people who can like nurture you in the way you haven't been nurtured. At the same time, as always, Saturn can limit Cancerian qualities, so you may fear showing your vulnerability and sort of present this front to the world that you are fine and everything is fine. There might be a struggle of like accepting duties if you don't feel like it, because feelings of Cancer get tied to responsibilities of Saturn. So you may sort of get like really very kind of hung up on the fact of like, do I feel like it? Do I feel emotionally attached? When some duties are literally just duties, right? Like you have to do something for work as part of your job description, even if you don't like doing it. I highly recommend, if you were born with this placement, my Saturn in Aquarius candle, because this is Saturn in rulership. It is conjunct Venus, so it's a softer Saturn, but it has the power to help you persevere, to set boundaries, to achieve things, to get mastery and recognition. And this is perfect for anyone born with Saturn in Cancer, Aries, or Leo. So at the same time, right, what is Saturn gonna try to do if you're born with Saturn in Cancer? Saturn will try to grow through being nurturing, through focusing on family, focusing on creating a comfortable home for oneself, a comfortable place. But once again, you got to make sure that you don't get stuck taking care of the family, and don't get stuck just sort of overloaded, overburdened, and feeling like, you know, people sort of forget about your feelings because they're so used to you maybe nurturing them and taking care of them. You just need to be, you need to be more discerning, I guess, when dealing with relatives. You need to learn to say no sometimes. You're also learning with this placement to master your emotions and master your feelings. On the positive, you know, once you learn to express your feelings, once you learn to kind of be vulnerable and ask people for help and not just say yes to everything that your family asks of you or demands of you, you can really become a very kind of emotionally mature person. Someone who knows when to nurture and when to say no, right? Like, because Saturn in Cancer will put a lot of effort in understanding emotions, in understanding your inner world, and in kind of showing compassion to yourself and to others. You can make really good historians, collectors, family, you know, you may run a family business or be in business related to real estate, property management, nurturance, and it just, yeah, it definitely takes baby steps. Sometimes Saturn in Cancer can also like suggest issues with digestion, because Cancer is all about like nurturance, sometimes through food. So, you know, doing breathing exercises, doing stretching, and making sure, once again, that you're not like swallowing everything, that you're expressing things, because that's like a little bit of like where Cancer can affect Saturn and Saturn can affect Cancer, swallowing things, trying to maintain peace, but then in reality feeling frustrated and overburdened. Let me know how this resonates. If you're curious to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. We can take a look at your natal chart, talk about your year to come, your relationship, and more. If you were born with Saturn in Leo, this is Saturn opposite its home sign of Aquarius, and it's another sign where Saturn is a little bit out of place, right? So Saturn is considered to be in detriment in Leo. And so you get the planet of responsibility and restriction and hard realism in the sign of the sun, in the sign of proud and bold and confident and solar Leo. So you mesh these two in a very healthy way, and you get someone who works on being generous, someone who's very noble and high-minded and have really strong morals, right? And really wants to always be the better version of themselves. But then Saturn smacks you in the face and says like, yeah, but not every single person will reciprocate it. Yeah, but like, you know, not everyone will be as moral or as generous as you. So it's also about learning discernment. Saturn is not super happy in fire signs. Fire signs are like driven by the spirit and enthusiasm, and Saturn says that, okay, like it's great to have it, but those are not like enough to achieve things. So Saturn in Leo can sometimes block that need for recognition that you have as Saturn in Leo, right? Like you, and a lot of times it starts early on, right? Like Saturn in Leo as a kid, you may have dealt with authority figures that were harsh and critical and maybe try to control and direct you. And so you may run into people like that as an adult as well. You may run into people who are like trying to control you or trying to tell you what to do. And part of you will feel like kind of, you know, obligated to help them or obligated to kind of show them the way. But part of you will also feel pressured and strained and restricted by them. So learning to overcome that, learning to also separate your sense of like grandiose thinking and your need to always be the best version of yourself with real life. Because people born with Saturn and Leo, they may take things too seriously. They may take playing a role of this like king too seriously, right? Like everything in life might feel like you have responsibility to do your best, to show your best, to care for people, to be there for them, to like be a certain way. And then in the process, you're like hampering yourself and you're blocking yourself and you're not letting yourself just enjoy life. And you're also, you know, simple things like responsibilities of life, like, I don't know, taking trash out might turn into this like big almost thing. Like maybe you feel like you have to do it while wearing your best outfit, right? Like you don't always have to be solar when you're doing Saturnian things. For anyone born with Saturn in Leo, my choice of the candle is Saturn in Aquarius. This is Saturn opposite your natal Saturn, so it can create a bit of a rational approach to duties, better boundaries, more mastery, more stability and recognition in your life. So, you know, on the positive, like I said, you can be very generous, you can be very kind of noble and moral, but you want to make sure you're learning how to separate solar and Saturnian. And also you tend to be someone who can be like a really great manager, very talented, very creative, really good at running a business, turning your gifts into a business, right? But you need to figure out how to balance that, like both sense of pride and desire for recognition with maybe inner like self-doubt and need to play a certain part, maybe even like feeling insecure and being afraid to ask for recognition, just knowing that it's okay to ask for it sometimes, especially for people you love and trust. It's a balancing act. That's why Saturn in Aquarius is a really good choice for you guys. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. We can talk about your year to come, your relationship, your natal chart, and more. And if this is your placement and you have something to share, please let me know. Now on to Saturn in Virgo. So people born with Saturn in Virgo may deal with a lot of criticism early in life. You know, Saturn represents our fears and restrictions. And so like, when you were a kid, you may have been restricted by other people's opinions of you or by other people's ideas of who you should be. Those may have been critical parents, critical teachers, people criticizing you for whatever, you know, for like whoever you were. So on some level, you develop this. And that, you know, that sort of influences you becoming a true perfectionist, because let's say your parents were very critical and sort of, maybe they were teachers and they were looking over your shoulder when you were doing homework. So you embody those qualities and you become someone who's like very perfectionist, very critical, has like a natural eye for detail. And when you're working on something, you're like almost gonna, you know, make sure that it's the best, which is great. but also limiting, right? Saturn limited by the qualities of Virgo. Virgo might limit you from, it might be like, you know, maybe it's the time to put out this album or put out this screenplay or this novel, but Virgo really wants things to be perfect. So some of the things you're working on overcoming with this placement is the fear of criticism, the fear of being imperfect, the fear of making mistakes, understanding that the standards you set for yourself might be too high, and to kind of like, you know, watching out that you're not too hard on yourself. This placement may also give you digestion issues. Virgo rules digestion, so watching out for what you're eating, taking responsibility. Like, you know, Saturn and Virgo will very much encourage you to eat healthy, to eat naturally, to have sort of good routines in terms of how you eat and what you eat, and create almost like structure around your digestion, around the food that you consume. On the positive, you know, you're very good at mastering details. You're very hardworking. You may sometimes be in the positions where other people see you being that hardworking and sort of load a lot of things on you, and you feel responsible to show your best, to do your best, and you say yes, but then you end up being overworked. So learning, you know, once again, to have better boundaries around work, to have better boundaries around self-care, because you may run into these cycles where you work too hard and you forget to take care of your body, and your body then kicks you in the gut in your digestion. Then you have to take time off to take care of yourself. So having good routines, taking care of, you know, of yourself. You also enjoy with this position, you like really enjoy being helpful and altruistic and generous and giving with others. And it could be a beautiful placement for someone who volunteers, for someone who teaches and, you know, does work that is somehow like helpful to the world. Also, you know, doing your best to find joy in the routines, in the mundane, in the duties life throws at you, like maybe turning on music, maybe putting on your favorite show, and maybe learning a language while you're doing it could be part of your lesson. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com, and let me know how this resonates. If this is your placement, do you feel like I did you justice? Or if you have something to add, please do so. If you were born with Saturn in Libra, this is Saturn in the sign of its exaltation. Every planet has the sign that it likes especially strongly, and for Saturn, it's Libra. Besides the signs the planet rules. So Saturn, you know, you got to remember that Saturn is the planet of rules and laws and realities and boundaries and sort of like being a manager, being like serious and realistic. And Libra is the sign of social conduct. Libra is the sign of the other person. Libra is the sign of beauty and harmony and justice. So you put Saturn in Libra, and Saturn becomes more about the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law, right? Like Saturn in Capricorn is very traditional, very structured, very by the book. And that is the letter of the law. So we're like following the rules as they were, right? Versus in Libra, there is a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more ability of like, okay, well, these are the ways we used to do things. How about we think of what is appropriate right now? Saturn in Libra is fair and just. It has the current it has a relationship with current events. It has the relationship with other people. So Saturn in Libra people tend to be very good at fairness, you know, quite literally, you know, like they have a child, the child comes to them and the child tells them about a situation that happened in school. The parent with Saturn and Libra will figure out the best way to like kind of figure out a way to compromise, right? Figure out a way to help the child and make things more smooth, but like it's not going to be sticking to the rules exactly as they were. It's going to be like, okay, what is appropriate? So they understand that rules are not what everyone agrees on, but they're more subject to interpretation. And please let me know if this is your placement. if this is who you are, right? So Saturn in Libra definitely has that benefit of like also being charming while telling people what to do. So people with this placement can make like really great lawyers and judges and, you know, anyone who's like in management, because they have the power to express rules with that charm of Libra. They can be really good at organizing schedules, organizing relationships. They have a really kind of natural eye for balance, harmony, and beauty. So, you know, if we're talking about Saturn and Saturn having to do with like, I don't know, balancing your checkbook or building your schedule, people with Saturn and Libra might add flowers into their checkbook, or they might have music playing in the background. They're definitely going to try to like have an element of joy in the way they handle things. Of course, you know, there's always a challenge with every single placement. So with Saturn and Libra, you may be a little bit more indecisive. You may, because you're so focused on what is right for the group and what is right for everyone, you may weigh the pros and cons of the situation too long and struggle making decisions once in a while. Because you're so responsible and you kind of have this strong awareness of relationship dynamics, you may at times avoid relationships because you feel like, you know, you're going to be really responsible for another person. So you take commitment very seriously. And this, you know, this could be great because you would do your best to understand the relationship, to figure out how to make a relationship work. But if you're someone, let's say you have a lot of like Sagittarius placements, maybe you choose to avoid commitment because you know that you'll have responsibility for that other person. Maybe you're not quite ready to take it yet. So the partnerships and the friendships that you form, they're not likely, you know, you're maybe very discerning with who you let into your life, but the partnerships you form are likely to be long lasting. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Now, if you were born with Saturn in Scorpio, with this placement, you will try to establish yourself and, you know, preserve yourself and master your powerful emotions, because this is likely to be a placement that has deep feelings. And so Saturn will at times block your feelings. At times, for sure, it can make you feel uncomfortable being vulnerable because Saturn says it's not appropriate right now. So you may sort of like hide your feelings, and even hide them from yourself. You may sort of feel like, no, I don't feel jealous. No, I don't feel obsessive. No, I like, you know, I'm okay. I'm sort of in control of my feelings. Well, in reality, you do. Let's not lie. So you may kind of hide your own vulnerabilities from yourself potentially. And like part of the lesson here is learning to open up, learning to, sort of open up to yourself and recognize that you have deep feelings, and at times maybe you run hot and cold because you're pushing those feelings aside. And you have a heart and you have a deep emotional responses to things, and you need connection with other people. So of course, with this placement, you got to be discerning with who you choose, who you let in, who is worth your trust, because you have that intuitive power to you. People born in 84, most of them had like Mars, because Mars went retrograde, Saturn and Pluto in Scorpio, so that's like a powerhouse of Scorpio. But people like Mars would be in Scorpio every couple of years, so basically, and Saturn is in Scorpio every 29 years. So I don't know why I went to Mars. Never mind. But like, I just think Mars and Pluto and Saturn together in like 84 was definitely a big deal. So part of your lesson, part of your goal is learning to control your feelings, is learning to get in touch with your emotions, to have sort of healthy outlets. Some of you might choose to express feelings through or even get in touch with them through tarot, through astrology, through like sexual work and sexual healing. actually, you know, like you do have the strong ability to understand others and strong ability to almost like control others. So you want to be careful that you're not going towards manipulating other people. You can be lovely and very powerful in an executive position where you have to deal with people because you have like a strong understanding of them. And once in a while, this placement can suggest that you, you know, like sexuality is really important with this placement. And at times it may be like restricted by Saturn, and at other times you may feel a very strong responsibility to like get like deeper understanding of your sexuality. So you might like explore and you might learn and you might kind of, you know, work on it. Sometimes Saturn in Scorpio can also represent a loss of someone, you know, like a close sort of person to you passing away when you were young. And so that is why you're a lot more discerning with expressing your feelings. And it can also maybe express that, like, you know, Scorpio being the sign of death and rebirth, Scorpio is being the sign of like transformation. Sometimes you might be, if you're not aware, you might sort of create drama. So you might be drawn towards like hidden affairs or hidden relationships. And so again, learning to understand your feelings, learning to find vulnerability in real life and expressing your emotions is part of the lessons here. Now, if you're Saturn in Sagittarius, like yours truly, Saturn in Sagittarius. Saturn is about responsibilities. Sagittarius is about adventure. Sagittarius is about striving for something more. So Saturn in Sagittarius craves adventure. It's also the type of a placement where you always have to have a mission. You always have to aspire towards something. And so Saturn will teach you patience. It's one of the big lessons here is learning to be patient and learning to trust the process and not push things too hard, right? But Saturn will also encourage you to work on your faraway aspirations and work on reaching your goals. But once again, in a patient, slow and steady way. Saturn is not a big fan of fire signs. It's in its fall in Aries, it's in detriment in Leo, and in Sagittarius it's like okay, right? But it's a little bit like, it's a little bit tricky at times, right? If you're born with Saturn in Sagittarius, Saturn might affect the Sagittarian nature. So if Sagittarius is like the learner, the adventurer, Saturn can sometimes hamper your enthusiasm, right? It can suggest that you only believe things that have like tangible proof behind them, that you're maybe like less sort of driven by just like believing philosophical and spiritual things, especially when younger. As you get older, you very much acquire wisdom and deeper understanding, and you start almost like I think with Saturn and Sagittarius, you can be so militant, Saturn, right, about learning things. Like if you're passionate about something, like, you know, me in astrology, like I'm also a Virgo, so I'm very much like, I have this one thing and I'm narrowing down versus like, and like Sagittarius too, Sagittarius being about education. Saturn will make sure that you will learn every single thing. You will understand it, you will dig deep, you will sort of, you know, connect very deeply with what you're interested in. So eventually, as you get older, you kind of learn discernment and patience that can fashion you into a leader and a teacher and sort of a deep kind of philosophical mind. But early in life, you may struggle with being organized. Sagittarius can affect Saturn, right? Sagittarius is very much go with the flow. What am I feeling like doing? So people born with Saturn and Sagittarius, and I'm completely guilty of that, can organize on the run. They have different schedule every day. I do that for sure. I mean, I have sort of the same beginning to my day and similar endings, but throughout the day, and I also like being a Virgo, I have like a long list of things. but it's always different. Like I never, I never have lunch at the exact same time. It's more like, how am I structuring my day? And if you have this placement too, it's definitely people born in like 86, 87 have this placement. Please share how it shows up in your life. So similarly with this kind of Sagittarian go with the flow energy, it's not always working in your favor. So sometimes you got to learn how to structure your day properly, how to get organized. And you also need to deal with that inner tension between your need for order and security and your desire to seek adventure and challenge, because those two are not necessarily always aligned with one another. So let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. We can talk about your natal chart. We can talk about your relationship, your year to come, and more. Now to those born with Saturn in Capricorn. This is Saturn in its home sign. Saturn being the king in its castle, happy in its domain, free to do whatever he wants. We got to remember here that Capricorn is a yin earth sign. So Saturn is happy here, but Saturn is a lot more traditional in Capricorn. So with this placement, you're way more responsible than most people. You have this like innate understanding of duty. Maybe something early in your life inspired this sense of responsibility and authority and, kind of being hardworking. And you at times have like a very much love-hate relationship with this side of you, right? You maybe you work really hard, but at times you feel like it's exhausting and it's just overwhelming and duties never end. You're also likely to be setting high standards for yourself and expecting a lot for yourself. So once in a while, these people can just sort of choose to walk away from material accomplishments, but then eventually they might come back, right? Because you do have a very strong desire for success and very strong, ambitious side to you, and you're not afraid to work hard. This is why Saturn is in its home sign in Capricorn, because Capricorn is the goat, right? The sea goat. Capricorn climbs the hill, climbs all the way to the top, commits to it, goes through challenges, has very strong discipline, very good at organizing, very determined, hardworking. So, if you set your mind on something, yes, it might take you 5 years, it might take you 10 years, but you're gonna get there. At the same time, Saturn can hinder the Capricornian ambition, right? Like Saturn can sometimes create sort of fear of disapproval, fear of doing things wrong, fear of doing things, not in the perfect way. Like you might be very focused on like doing things exactly the right way. So learning to like let go of that perfection a little bit and learning to, enjoy life a little bit too, and not just focus on like responsibility. Also becoming, naturally, I think if you're born with Saturn in Capricorn, you are quite discerning with, your time and your boundaries. But sometimes you may also kind of like learn to set boundaries around self-care and like let yourself relax and let yourself have a good time. So you're not just constantly achieving things. And also not being afraid, I think, to ask for help. Not being afraid to bring other people into the mix, to even share your feelings with a therapist. Talk about your fear of failure or your fear of being imperfect, right? Working, having a business could be like enjoyable to you. At the same time, having a business might be perhaps a bit challenging because you kind of have to be your own boss, and sometimes you might prefer following the structures a little bit more. But that's like, once again, sort of love-hate relationship, because being your own boss gives you more freedom, but it also increases the duties, and you're already someone who's like very dutiful and hardworking. And so it's the question, like, do you want more duties or do you not? Saturn also rules bones and knees, which could be sometimes the area of your life that you're like, the area of your body that you're protecting more, right? The area of the body that needs to be protected. But because it's Saturn in rulership, it can actually give you strong bones, strong teeth, strong bone structure. Let me know how this resonates. Please share if this describes you. And if you're curious to know more about your natal chart, your year to come, your relationship, please book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Now, if you were born with Saturn in Aquarius, I have a candle that is called Saturn in Aquarius just for you. Saturn in Aquarius is another sign of rulership. It's Saturn in a young sign of air. And so Saturn loves being in Aquarius. I'm a traditional astrologer, so traditionally Saturn rules Aquarius. I know modern astrologers use Uranus. I'm sort of, I use both a little bit, but I think Saturn is very much ruling Aquarius, right? And we'll talk about that more right now. So Saturn is about structures, it's about boundaries, it's about hard work. Aquarius is the sign that is outside of the, it's the sign of an outsider. It's the sign that is from the outside looking in. It is the sign of a rebel. It is the sign of a revolutionary. It's the sign that breaks the rules to make new rules. And that's a lot of times I think people underestimate how stubborn Aquarius might be, how serious of a perspective Aquarius has. Like Aquarius gets this reputation of like a rebel, but Aquarius is a rebel with a cause, right? Like that's where Saturnian energy comes in. Aquarius, people born with Saturn in Aquarius, they have strong discipline, they have strong opinions. A lot of times they have opinions on questions of community and the workforce. Like they will be very much concerned with these like issues of humans, because that is what like Aquarius air sign is about. They will be concerned with, bringing power to community, making sure the work day is justified. It's like the sign of creating a union. But what do you need when you create those things? You need the rules, you need the laws. So people with Saturn and Aquarius a lot of times have a very strong desire to break away from the existing structure to create their own structure. And that's why Saturn is quite happy in Aquarius. These people are really good at getting along with people, with others, organizing groups, organizing concepts. They often have a very kind of close-knit circle of friends. It maybe is not the biggest circle of friends because they're very discerning with who they let in. And very kind of, like good at supporting friendships, supporting groups, supporting collectives. But you gotta watch out with this placement that you're not too like extreme, that you're not too stubborn, too sort of unyielding in your approach. And a lot of times I think this placement makes you feel like an outsider. It makes you feel like you have the heavy burden of the knowledge, the heavy burden of responsibility. And so also similarly to other strong Saturnian placements, like learning to ask for help, learning to delegate and maybe work with other people could be quite important. Even though you're like really good at working with other people, I think you may still feel like nobody quite sees the plan or the vision as you do. Early in life, you may sort of feel rejected or feel mistrustful of other people, of the groups of people, feel misunderstood, and this is also part of your strength because you have the ability to include other people, to create a community for the outsiders. But I think learning to overcome that sense of, I don't belong, I am different than others, I'm not loved, could be part of your part of your karmic purpose for sure. Let me know how this resonates. If you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. Last but not least, if you were born with Saturn in Pisces, this is the Saturn we have going on right now, all the way until February 2026. So Saturn in Pisces is the planet of responsibilities in the watery, emotional sign of Pisces. So here Saturn feels dutiful to overcome the restrictions of feeling. So it feels dutiful to transcend any limitations, to to work with the feelings, to unite with some kind of greater purpose, right? But of course, Saturn and Pisces can work together in complementary fashion, or they can work against one another, right? So with Saturn in Pisces, Pisces can work against Saturn, right? Pisces, at times you may want to escape. So people with this placement, they may want to, like, sometimes real life gets so difficult, so overwhelming, they just choose to run away. Like you decide to move to another country when things are hard, right? Because you're seeking that fresh start. Or sometimes Saturn can affect Pisces and create an excessive fearfulness when it comes to escaping, or when it comes to creating, when it comes to being a mentor, a leader, a healer, because Saturn kind of makes you doubt yourself. It makes you second guess yourself. And maybe, maybe when you were like early in life, when you were young, maybe other people made fun of your sensitivity. Maybe other people were harsh on you when you showed emotions. Maybe other people didn't sort of embrace your kindness and care for other people. So that's where that sort of inner criticism of being vulnerable may be coming from, right? Like you almost reject the vulnerability in yourself. You may kind of feel very judgmental on some level, Saturn, of people who are victims, or people who are victimizing themselves, or being most likely, people victimizing themselves. You feel uncomfortable with that sense of vulnerability because you have learned to sort of mask it and hide it within yourself. Once you become more self-aware, you learn to accept your own feelings and the fact that you also have, sort of deep emotions, and you're also vulnerable, and maybe you're also are a victim in some part of your life, but you can also kind of work with it, right? I think Saturn in Pisces is very much encourages you to connect with your feelings through therapy, through spirituality, yoga, meditation, journaling, through creativity. Saturn in Pisces people, Kurt Cobain had Saturn in Pisces. There's so many examples of like poetic, melancholic. It's like Saturn in Pisces is like a sad poet type character. He's very like, he's about duties, but he's very nostalgic and creative and sensitive and poetic. So you can do a lot of work to help heal other people. And in the process, I think you can heal yourself. A lot of times, people born with Saturn in Pisces is definitely very creative, but I think they might not care so much about material success. They care more about helping, healing, expressing their feelings, connecting with their feelings. Saturn also teaches you discernment. Saturn here can teach you to say no to things and people that are draining you, and maybe take more responsibility over your mental health, for sure. You have to learn with this placement to be discerning about things that are worth sacrificing for versus things that are maybe not worth sacrificing for. And learning to accept spiritual teachings, learning to accept yourself for who you are, not being too hard on yourself, feeling okay to be vulnerable are some of the lessons that this placement brings. Let me know how this resonates. Please share your stories if you were born with Saturn in Pisces. And if you want to know more, book a reading on my website, anastasiadoesastrology.com. I will be happy to talk about your natal chart, your year to come, your relationship, and more. And this is it for Saturn in the zodiac signs. I don't know if I'll continue with these, because once we hit like outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, Pluto takes over 200 years to circle the zodiac, so it doesn't make sense to talk about Pluto in Aries because none of them are alive right now. So we'll see if I'll get to that. Please share if you have any ideas about content you'd like to see more on my channel, and please subscribe if you haven't yet. Have a great day, have a great night, whatever time of day it is when you're watching this. Watch another one of my videos. Watch like other planets. Check out what I have to say about your other placements. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.